Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on proven strategies for selecting a LIMS that powers your digital transformation. My name is Philip, and I will be your moderator for today. We are thrilled that you could join us. Today's session featuring Mr. Gerard Ipskam, an expert in manufacturing operations management, who will share insights into how you can streamline your lab operations, improve data integrity, and navigate the complexities of choosing the right LIMS, which isn't easy overall. Our goal here is to help and also to cut through the confusions and take clear steps toward a robust digital strategy for your lab. So let's jump directly in. Before we start, a few housekeeping notes. Just to know, we are recording this session, so if you like to revisit any part to a later date, the recording will be available and we will share all this information. If you have any kind of question during the webinar, just use the chat box on the bottom right corner and type it in, or unmute at our Q&A session at the end of Gerard's presentation. The presentation slides are available upon request, or we will share it then afterwards with our follow-up message. And if you have any other questions or inquiries, requests, just send us an email on hello@onelims.com. So we want to ensure you get the maximum value out of this session, so please do engage with us, ask questions, and share your thoughts. Now is a big privilege to introduce our expert speaker, Mr. Gerard Ipskam. He is a well-respected authority in manufacturing, operations, and management, known for his hands-on approach to digital transformation in laboratory and quality environments. Gerard is a senior consultant and thought leader at the Manufacturing Operations Management Institute, MOMI. In this role, he provides strategic guidance to organizations seeking to modernize their lab operations and align them with broader enterprise systems. His expertise spans everything from LIMS, implementation, and data governance to compliance with regulatory standards like FDA, GMP, or ISO. His blend of deep industry knowledge and an unwavering focus on practical results sets Gerard apart. Having led multiple large-scale projects, he's owned a methodology that effectively bridges the gap between organizational strategies and day-to-day lab processes. He's helped companies phase out inefficiencies, spreadsheet-based workflows, improve data integrity, and secure the stakeholder buy-in essential for any digital transformational initiative. Drawing on more than 20 to 25 years of experience, Gerard has guided cross-functional teams from lab technicians and IT specialists to executive leaderships through selecting and deploying modern IT solutions. Whether evaluating potential vendors or creating objective scoring matrices or defining functional and technical requirements, Gerard tracking records speaks for itself. He's well known for turning complex challenges into clear, actionable steps, ensuring that technology investments deliver meaningful long-term value. For today, Gerard will share invaluable insights on choosing the right LIMS and integrating it seamlessly with existing systems. I can think of anyone better to speak on this topic. I'm confident you will leave this session equipped with fresh perspective and practical tools to drive your laboratory digitalization evolution. Gerard, thank you very much for joining us today and having the time.
Welcome.
So, also very quick to fly through, we have defined some goals for today's session. And number one is to understand the risks of legacy tools in laboratories. Number two is to learn best practices for LIMS selection. Number three is to plan a smooth implementation and what is needed for. And the fourth point is to drive sustainable digital transformation. By the end of this webinar, we hope you will feel confident about the steps you need to take to select and implement a LIMS that generally supports your digital strategy. This is where we dive into the main content. So Gerard will walk us through practical proven strategies to move from that initial confusion where you're dealing with spreadsheets and manual tasks towards a crystal clear path forward. He will share real-life insights on how to systematically approach vendor selection. So, Gerard, I want to give you the word, and the stage is all yours.
Okay, thank you, Philip, for the nice introduction. Let me share my screen, of course. In the meantime, everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm going to talk 35 minutes about mainly selecting a good LIMS. We like quotes, so I put a quote on every top slide that we have, title slide. So here we stops being better, stops being good. I was a teacher previously, so that is in my blood to think that way. Okay, a little bit about myself. You get the slides as a PDF, so you can read this for yourself. But to give a little bit more background, I'm a chemist from education. I did a university in the Netherlands. I'm from the Netherlands. You probably can hear that. And after that, I was a teacher for 10 years, educating lab technicians. So that's where my interest and my knowledge is coming from. After that, I was 6 years LIMS project management for implementations, but also architect, functional design responsible. So since then, I have broadened a little bit. I do now also production and master data and planning and scheduling and these type of things. But yeah, quality and LIMS and laboratory is still in my backpack, and I do a lot in this area. Momai, we are not so big, but we try to do two different things. We do education, so we have a license training from MESA. If you don't know that, that's an American institute that does a training that is more production oriented, and we have our own catalog of trainings. And besides that, we do business consultancy. And one of the things you see there in the third bullet is select the right software, which we will talk about. But in general, we try to help companies to do everything from an idea that you need to do something to the project itself. And then when needed, we assist the project. But we work mainly up to the project as such. Yeah, so that's what we do. Not too long about that. The program of today is 4 chapters, 4 parts. I first want to talk a little bit about Excel and compare that with LIMS. Then what about criteria? How do you select a good LIMS for your situation? Then the methodology itself. We have a standardized methodology we use already for over 15 years, selecting all types of things. So also in manufacturing systems or master data solutions or planning and scheduling solutions. So it's you can use it for different solutions. That's the main part of the presentation, and then in the end I will make some remarks about implementation as such. So first, talk about Excel. Many companies, many laboratories still use Excel. In one of my educations, I have a fun question, and I ask what MES means, and MES means many Excel sheets. So that's in many companies still the case, and laboratory is not an exception there. And currently I'm working in an agriculture laboratory, and even there they have a LIMS, but still they have so many Excels around that you wonder how that can be supported and how that is working. In all those years, I collected a kind of list that compares these, because you always have this discussion. So I will not go through every item, but for example, audit trail is always, and the more regulated you are, the more discussions you have about it. In Excel, you don't have an audit trail. You cannot see who did what, when, where, what was changed, etc. And I think all the LIMS systems I know, serious LIMS systems, there is an audit trail. Sometimes not easy accessible, but that's a different discussion, but it is there. So if you want it, then it's there. Or things like version control. So in Excel, whenever I do an assessment or a type of audit in the laboratory, then and I ask a month ago, what was it the same Excel? People don't know. You cannot see that or find out easily what was the Excel version at that moment. With a LIMS system, it's way better. That big collaboration, difficult with multiple users. So locking the Excel, typing in the same cell, etc., etc. So also difficult. The more you have more people at the same time do different tests, putting that in the same Excel, you have all types of issues there. Now, I leave the rest for you to see, and probably there's a couple more, but most of the time this is enough to convince management that they should maybe go away from Excel and go a little bit more to LIMS systems. The other thing I want to mention very clearly is that for me, if I talk about a LIMS system, the M is something. So a laboratory information management system means that you, with the system, also manage your laboratory. For the rest of the organization, and we still see that, it was 20 years ago that way, and it's still the way, a laboratory is a black box. You put money in, and you hope that you get as quick as possible the results out of it, so the lead time, and that's all that the rest of the organization is interested in. There are good exceptions. Nothing about that. Everybody is this way, but we still find a lot of organizations that think this way about a laboratory, which has resulted in that a laboratory must organize their own processes as effective and reliable as possible. They cannot really rely on others in an organization. And because of that, and you see that in the scope of the LIMS system, which will be in the next slide, LIMS became the critical solution for an effective and reliable laboratory. That story, I always present that in a picture. So what goes into the laboratory, if you look high level, that's samples. What comes out are results, reporting in one way or the other way. And you have two processes. And a lot of companies only focus on the main testing process, which is here going from sampling to receival and material preparation, testing, etc. And forget that quite some benefit if you make a business case for a LIMS selection and a LIMS implementation. Quite some benefit is coming from all the other things where you still have Excels. for your equipment management, for your qualifications of your lab technicians, for standards or reference management, for inventory management, retain samples, trends and statistics, etc., etc. So a lot of other functionalities that are also needed and should be part of your LIMS system, where the M means laboratory management. So that's one of the things. When I do a selection, then we look at the whole picture and not only at the top one. What about criteria? Now, of course, everybody knows you should think about criteria before you start selecting. That's a common knowledge. But I have maybe a surprising statement for you. If we do a selection, we select on the must-haves and on the important nice-to-haves. If we do a selection, we select on what you might need in the next 5 years. I often say, when I talk to companies and to laboratory management, you need to select on the 120% that you need now. So you have to think upfront, because if you buy now something which only does what you are doing now, then you have in 5 years maybe a problem. So think ahead and try to imagine what you might need in 5 years. But you don't have to implement everything in phase 1. So when I say the 120%, I always say, and if you implement in phase 1 70%, on budget, on time, then you have done a perfect project and you are probably best in class. So that's why we say select on the must-haves and the nice-to-haves that you think are important, because the nice-to-have from now can be a must-have of tomorrow. It's not the first time that we would see that. Because of that, last 5 to 10 years, we did not use what is called in literature the Moscow methodology. So finding and deciding and discussing what is a must-have and a should-have and a could-have and a would-have, etc., etc. Yeah, we do it differently. If it's not important enough to select on, then we don't put it into the requirements. Yeah. Nice-to-haves are nice-to-haves, and if you don't want to select on it, then then it's not important enough. What is behind that is also the idea we don't create a user requirement specification for the implementation. So the requirements we put in the documents are the requirements for the selection. Of course, you can use that to extend on that and then write a user requirement specification for the project. But for the selection itself, we only put in the RFP, RFQ, RFI, whatever you name it, only those requirements that will make a difference in the selection. Asking a vendor if you can put a number into a field, every vendor will say yes. So that's not a requirement which is useful for a selection. And last but not least, many solutions in the market have most of the must-haves. You will see if you take 5 LIMS vendors and you go through the must-haves, then it's a mature market. Most will say yes on all or most of these requirements. So you don't have to ask for everything. So you try to focus on really the nitty-gritty differences that you in your laboratory need and do different than maybe others. The type of requirements we have are 3 different types. So we have functional, process and activities, can be must-haves or important nice-to-haves, as I explained in the previous slide. But it's functional. It's something happens with something you do in the laboratory. Then we have the non-functional requirements. These are often technical, often coming from IT, but also can be the project management methodology, the language of the help desk, a lot of other things which are not functional but still important. Single sign-on, private cloud prepared, etc., etc. Well, that's IT, private cloud, but a single sign-on. But non-functional are important. I will be honest, in the end, that's not often the decisive category of functionality for chosen LIMS. It's most of the time the functional part that is important. Are you in the compliance, in a regulated industry, then compliance is what I call knockout must-haves. So those must-haves you really need to have, otherwise, yeah, you still have a hybrid situation. You can still use that LIMS, but you need to have paper processes around it to make sure that you keep compliant, and that's not what you want. If you go for a new LIMS, that's costing money, costing time, costing effort. You should strive and try to get the best way you can do. So must-haves for compliancy are knockouts in our methodology. As I said, functional is in our methodology really the most important part, and that is also because we experience that mature market means they can most of the vendors can do most of the things. So what we try to do is define demo scenarios and use cases and have the vendor show that, and we will see that in the description of the methodology. So the demo scenarios are very important in our selection methodology. Because I do it already many years, I started 15, 20 years ago to making a long list of functionalities that I found in the URS I made myself. And when I worked for a vendor, then the RFPs we received, and so I created a list. So I have a list with 7 categories of functionalities that can be in a requirement document. So basic functionalities, LIMS and ELN. Sometimes that's gray area. What is ELN? What is LIMS? So that's why I sometimes put them on one list. Reporting and printing, compliance, equipment and equipment management and connections and these type of things. Special modules like maybe recipes or plate handling or something which is specific for you, or a type of laboratories. Plate handling is if you do metallurgy, so metals, then plate handling is not really interesting. Configuration, of course. Most systems are quite configurable, but still there are differences, especially in configurability of reporting and printing, for example. And then we have a long list of other things that you could do in a LIMS system, but not necessarily maybe should do, like document management. If your company has a document management system, then don't use LIMS for it. It's not intended for that. But if your company doesn't have a document management system, then it might be interesting to look for LIMS, and they are there who can also do document management. So that's in the other category. For the basic functionality, I have here a list of part of the list of functionalities that you can find there. That goes from input mask that you can only put in numbers or something like that, or mandatory results, or commands to objects, or shelf life, default results. Now, you get the PDF, so you can use this list for your own situation and see what is applicable and what not, for example. And it helps me in my work if I go into a laboratory and start gathering requirements. This is a list that I use to make sure that I'm not easy missing anything in my collecting requirements. The main part of the presentation is about our methodology. Methodology, the objective is, in the end, we want to have an acceptance and an active participation of everybody involved. So the end result, every important person was active in the process, and in the end, there's no resistance, or as less as possible resistance in what is selected. In the end, you need to be convinced that you have a sufficiently good LIMS product. And I always use there the example, if you want to drive in London, then you don't buy a Ferrari. So because that's quite useless, that's overkill. So a sufficient good LIMS for now and for at least the next 5 years. And you want to have transparency and validity of the selection process itself, and it's almost 100%, either during the process or near the end, or even after the process, there's always somebody in the organization questioning the results of the selection. And if you then have a good process, you have documents, you know exactly what you did, when, why, etc., then answering those questions and countering it is quite easy. I had several phone calls of counterparts in companies who called me after 1 or 2 months and said, we are so happy that you forced us to have this really documented process, because all those questions we were very easy to dismiss and answer. 2 phases. The first phase is going from a long list to a short list, and you want to do that as quick as possible. You don't want to spend time on all those vendors that might not be good enough to go into your short list. So, quick as possible, go to the short list. And then in phase 2, finding the champion, then you want to spend all the time with only a few, 2, 3, maybe 4 vendors to get good proposals that you can compare quite well. You gave them all the opportunities to understand you and make the best proposal. Hey, you spend time with those vendors that you really want to evaluate. So that's the idea. This is the process. We do some preparations. I will talk about that in the next slide. Then we start looking for those criteria, hopefully a lot of knockout criteria, because otherwise, selecting is having knockouts. But sometimes it's also just important criteria that you want to make sure that they can do that or not. Initial list, going to the short list, there are 2 streams there. If we have already enough information, we go by stream A. We do the evaluation ourselves. The vendor doesn't even know that they are evaluated. And in the end, we present to the stakeholders the shortlist with the argumentation why that is a good shortlist. If we don't have enough information, then we go in stream B. We send out an RFI, 20, 25 questions, hopefully all knockout questions, and evaluate them, and then go to the shortlist. We present that to the stakeholders. They say, go ahead, go to phase 2. Then we write the RFP, send that out. Vendors answer the questions during the RFP and after the RFP evaluation. So as a preparation for the demos, the vendors can ask not whatever they want, but they get all the freedom to visit if that's possible, and have sessions to ask questions, and etc. etc. Because we say, and most companies follow us there, you want a good proposal. So give the vendor the information they think they need. And it's also a good feeling that you have with the vendor then, how they act. So the culture and the way of working, the way of thinking, the standard of quality, etc., etc. So what is called here site visit is a process with the vendor to make sure that you have a good demo and a good RFP. Then we have a demo day. It's 1 day, most of the time from 9:30 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 60% of the time is demo of the live solution with the scenarios that we have written in the RFP. And then we have some other discussions about project management and pricing and these type of things. In this demo, we always ask as many people as possible. I think the most was last year in a brewery here in the Netherlands. We had around 25 people on the demo. So from six breweries, 2 to 3 people for each brewery, and then a couple of other people. So they all write down their assessment, what they think about the demos, and in that case, I did the summary of that. And a couple of days later, we had a final evaluation session of 3 hours, where everybody who wanted to discuss with us was invited, and we discussed the scorings and the final ranking. So that's more or less the process. It is not the same as 20 years ago, but almost the same. 20 years ago, the solutions were more programming libraries and less real solutions. So you did a couple of things a little bit different, but essentially this idea is already there for 20 years. Prerequisites. Now, what we always say is, when you want to start a clean selection, then you should have all these things: a vision, a benefit case, an architecture, a roadmap. So if you do multi-laboratory rollouts, then which one first and which one second, and so generically, clear scope, clear focus. Again, this is the scope and the focus for the selection, so that the project can be smaller, and the known risks that you might have. If you have this really at the start of the selection, then you're probably one of the few that is able to do that. When we come in a company to help with a selection, then most of the time, at least 3 or 4 of these we still have to do together with the company and the laboratory, of course. But having this makes the process even more smooth and to the point. How do I make an initial list normally? I have a list of 7, 8, 9 vendors that I almost every time put on there. It's the well-known ones. And then I extend that to 10, sometimes 15 vendors to include startups who might be a challenger, or a local player that is really good, or a list 10 to 15 vendors is enough. Sometimes we see that SAP, the ERP system, also wants to participate with one of their modules, SAP QM. We allow that. They get the same RFP and they have to do the same demo, and so why not? If they have the best solution, then that should be become clear out of the process. Sometimes there's trust, and then companies ask us to immediately tell them which vendor I think the 3 or 5 to 5 vendors are the best ones for them, and then we start with the RFP process directly. So depends on how long you know the company when you start that. This slide is for you to read. Everything I tell is here more or less in text. You see that LIMS selections typically follow stream B. So we need an RFI often to get the information to go from 10, 12, 15 to 3, 4 vendors. Requirement document. One of my statements there is always make sure that you realize that the vendor doesn't know you. So don't send them just an Excel with requirements, because he has no clue what you are asking, and he will probably say yes to everything, just to be sure that he's invited for whatever next step there is. So what I try to do is write an RFP with objectives for a LIMS implementation, with at least high-level process descriptions, how it goes, what is important. Then, of course, the functionalities and the other requirements. A little bit about the interfaces, what interfaces to MES or safety sheet software that you might have running, or to equipment, testing equipment. So you describe the interfaces that might be needed, not in detail, but in overview. We always ask a couple of open questions to challenge vendors to show their commitment to you. And then, as I said, very important, we have specific test cases and scenarios. Evaluation matrix. We did it in the past, but already a long time not anymore, because you get these type of results. If you look at the bottom, you see 68, 69.2. Is that significant, different? And what about 73.7? Is X better than the others? We were not sure. So what we do now is we have here, we have people writing down their observations, like the 3 best and the 3 disappointing functionalities in a demo or something like that. And and we make that to a discussion session, as I explained already. And in the final evaluation session, in 3 hours, we go through all those items and try to get to and that's maybe very Dutch, but to a common sense, which is probably the best solution for this laboratory. And the last 5 to 10 years, that worked quite well. What we also do is we invite the budget holder or the stakeholder or the decision maker in the end, and he's sitting in. He's not allowed to talk, but he can listen in and taste what are important arguments to go into a ranked list at the end. So no Excels anymore, because in the end you are not sure who puts in what and how good he is in scoring, and because you have people who fill in everywhere, 6 out of 10, for example, just to I cannot choose. That doesn't help, of course. But we do it more in words. What functionality did you like, and what functionality didn't you like? Again, for phase 2, a description for you to read. It's more or less what I said in the other slides. Looking at the time, so 5 most made mistakes. Too much or too little in the documents, not getting enough organizational participation. Make sure you get a good feel of your partner, if it's a vendor or a solution provider, system integrator. You have to work with them probably at least 6 months, but probably longer, and the relationship is important there. Yeah, and forgetting about the future, I mentioned that already. Ask functionality for the next 5 years also. The project, there's a nice picture. You start with your requirements, then the budget is always less, so you have to cut some nice to haves. You do a selection, you do your first deployment. There are some surprises, so a little bit more. Then we have other roll out to other laboratories, and this is the way we explain management how it will go, and that's of course not true. This is how it will go. So at the selection already, we find out, oh, is that possible in a LIMS system? Oh, let's do that also. So there you start already what we call progressive insight. And that will, with the first deployment, they will say, oh, we didn't tell you this, and we didn't tell you that. Oh yeah, we forgot to tell you this, etc. So prepare in your budget, in a long budget for 3 to 5 years, that this is the real process. You will have, with every rollout, you will have new functionalities or new configurations. It's not always customization, but time to implement something that you didn't know about. And then last, always forgotten, especially if you come from paper and Excel, you need to think about what is your process for incidents and changes. So who is going, the end user, who is he going to call? A service desk, a key user, and who is he going to call? And the vendor, most of the time, is the third line support. Having said that, that finished my story, Philip.
Very, very interesting. Awesome slides, and also very valuable and useful information. That brings me also, so to have set some questions here that I believe many of you will find both intriguing and unique. There aren't kind of typical off-the-shelf LIMS questions, but rather deep dives into how to approach the challenges of selection, implementation, and future trends. So what me is interesting too, or what I want to ask is, when is the best time to approach you within this LIMS selection journey?
Yeah. Depends on your maturity. So if you have the feeling and you know from yourself that you're not so mature, and you can, for example, look at, do you really have work descriptions and SOPs and these type of things really in place, and you follow them and they are managed, and then you probably are quite mature. Then you can do more yourself. Then you do the rest of the thing also. So you can come to me just before you really want to start a selection, because then I don't have to do all the preparations. You have probably done it yourself. If you don't have capacity or you're not so mature, then yeah, you have to come 2 months earlier, at least, to be able to give you a business case, a roadmap, an architecture, etc., etc. So yeah.
Okay, that's already a good point, and leads to the next question related to how long does a selection an average takes? Can you give there a kind of a number or a time frame?
Yeah, it depends, of course, on the number of laboratories and how much the laboratories are lookalikes. If you have 6 laboratories, but they are all the same, then you can only look at one and just say the rest is the same. But in general, we could do a selection in 4 weeks, but then you have to trust us completely, because then we look around, we say, okay, this is the vendor you need to have. We'll organize a demo, they do a demo, and you can buy it. So, but to have the acceptance and to have the eagerness of stakeholders to want to be the first one to implement it, you have to take your people with you in the whole process. And then you should think about 3 to 6 months.
Just for the evaluation?
Just for the evaluation,
okay.
Yeah. And it's not that we cannot quicker, but it's freeing up the people. They have to read documents, they have to think about functionality they want in the system, etc., etc. So it's the internal process in the laboratory that is the lag time that takes so long.
Is there kind of similar, if you want to move from paper and Excel to a LIMS, or want to move from existing LIMS to another one?
That's a good question.
Just pop up my mind.
Really yeah, no problem. The same answer. If the maturity in paper and Excel is high, then it's the same as going from another system. But if your paper and Excel is also not so mature, we need more time to discuss what is the to-be process. So that's then the time-consuming activity as such. Yep.
Good answer. Thanks also for that. If someone of the attendees have any kind of question, you can unmute yourself and ask directly to Gerard, or type in the chat section, bottom right corner. That leads also to another question. I want to quickly have a thought experiment. So if you had only 24 hours to evaluate laboratories' readiness for a new LIMS, what specific indicators or tells would you look for to measure the lab's actual level of preparedness or readiness? Do you have such kind of indicators?
Yeah, it's not KPIs. It's I think a couple of things we do. First of all, we look at what I mentioned already. If you have your work descriptions and your SOPs, if you have them already in place and you really follow them, that's a good indicator that you could be ready. The other thing is that we check that more or less. So one of the things I do is quite easy. I go to the sample receiving, and you see all the types of samples that come in, and you look for the documents that describe what to do with those samples. If they have also other samples which are not in a process described, or research samples or whatever, then you know they are less mature and they might not be totally ready to start a selection. There are processes that need to be discussed, that need to be described, etc., etc. The other thing is the reporting in the end. So if there's a lot of reporting in the end, then probably we need to discuss who needs what information and when before we start the selection. Because I did once a project and we just stopped 25 reports in the old system, and we found out that only one report was really used. And yeah, it was around 100,000 gulden. It's before the euros, but it was a lot of money that they didn't have to spend on creating reports. So so that's the other. So the start and the end are really a good indicator if they are ready or not.
So it's kind of crucial and essential to have also a cleanup phase in it, where to review and clean up all the legacy data. Let's call it like that.
Yeah, and the legacy processes, all the exceptions. Yeah. So with this customer we do this a little bit different, and with that customer we do that a little. I have another experience with an environmental laboratory, and they had 25, maybe it's 24, but it doesn't matter. They had a lot of reports to their customers, and they said, well, we will deliver 6 reports standard for free, and every other report the customer have to pay for. And surprise, surprise, nobody paid, and everybody went for the 6 that were for free. So yeah, you have to be careful and challenge those type of things. Yeah.
Also your own stakeholders.
Yeah. You have to clean up. Yeah, you have to clean up.
Or kind of train them.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting story. It's also makes me curious about was there any kind of moment where a tiny small detail in a vendor selection process greatly impacted the overall success or even failure of LIMS selection?
The question is a little bit strange, because if there's a small detail not good, then they are not selected. So it will not influence. The best one doesn't have those small details. But I can give you an example of something which was surprising, but I did a selection in Ireland, and one of the vendors came with nothing against whatever country, but they came with a Turkish project manager, probably a good project manager, nothing wrong with it. But during the demo day, it became clear that the culture fit between the Irish company and the Turkish project manager was really not good. And in the end, it was not decisive, but it was really an argument. It was discussed. Should we take the risk to work with such a culture misfit? And it's a small detail, the country of somebody who does the project with you, but yeah, sometimes that can be important. Yeah.
Nice story. Yeah, very.
And maybe another one. What I also want a lot about is, and don't choose the vendor where the sales guy is the nicest guy, because the sales guy leaves you after he sold it. So he doesn't need to be nice. You need to work with the people doing delivery and support. Those people need to be nice. So
project managers and
project manager, help desk, etc. So yeah,
that's a very good tip. Yeah, very good point. Another question which I want to ask and dropped in is: do you see some most significant gaps in how labs measure their return on investment on the LIMS, and probably how they can better capture the investments pool's value, so tangible or intangible, how they can evaluate or elaborate this benefits, this investment?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a very honest answer. So most laboratories don't measure, in the end, the benefit of the LIMS implementation. Period.
Okay.
So it's not done. So they think they need a LIMS. There is a good business case when they start. So tangible or non-tangible, a combination most of the time. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention that also. And 40% of the business case normally is for outside of the laboratory itself. It's about the people who use the data. So 40% of the benefit case, the business case, is located outside of the laboratory. But you start, you select one, and you do the project, and then there's another project already coming in, and they don't measure.
As a follow-up question, is it because it's too complicated, it's too much effort, or they just barely don't interested in? Because it's already paid, it's implemented, it's working, it's okay.
Yeah, that.
Okay.
Yeah. I did it only once in my whole career with another brewery in Western Europe. And they asked me after 3 months to go around again. Oh, I did it twice, also with an edible oil company. After 3 months, go around and see what the new needs are, or if everything was implemented as described in the contract, and also propose some new enhancement that would be interesting. But that is twice in 20 years, so that's not a lot.
Would you recommend that often within an LIMS implementation project?
I would recommend it not directly, but after 3 to 6 months, because then people start learning to work with it, get ideas what could be done also, maybe missing an interface which was intended but was not implemented, and you can pick up that and do it a little bit later. So yeah, I will do that. It's not expensive. If I did the selection and they asked me back to do that, it takes maybe 2 or 3 days for me to do that. It's not that difficult, and not too expensive. Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just to review the current state.
Yeah, the new current state after 6 months that you are on to go live, then look at the new current state and see what if you miss something. And most of the time they miss something somewhere. An equipment that was promised, or an interface that was promised and not implemented, or something like that. So yeah, I recommend it.
Good. Yeah, we also do this at every kind of one LIMS implementation project. To close today's session and give you again the word, any kind of words of wisdom, experience quotes, or anything to add to today's session from your side, Gerard?
Selecting a LIMS is not that important, that difficult. It helps if you have, like me, some experience. But with the process I described here, you could do it yourself. So you don't need me by definition to do a good selection. I've seen several laboratories that do it themselves and with a good result. But my message is follow this or a lookalike process, so that you are in control of the selection and can prove it, and that's the main message I want to give.
Thanks for that. That gives a really good guidance over such for some people complex processes, and there is a heterogeneous zoo of different vendors, which provides also different kind of LIMS solutions, and that gives some clarity, and you brought also some clarity and very good insights, which are best practice insights to find through and cut through this evaluation journey. That brings me also to the conclusion of our webinar. On behalf of Gerard and the entire team, I want to extend also my and our heartfelt thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thanks very much. Also to the attendees for the engagement. The questions and the time are greatly appreciated from our side. If you still have any open questions or want to explore any kind of topic in more detail, reach out to Gerard directly. content detail. We will also, the contact details we will share in our follow-up mails, and it was sharing before on the slide. Or you can also contact us at hello@onelims.com or visit our website on onelims.com. We'll send a follow-up mail with all the link of the recording, also the presentation slide as a PDF, as Gerard mentioned already. So we look forward to see all of you again at our next event. And in the meantime, keep innovating and stay on the path to truly digital, efficient, and compliant laboratory. And thanks again for being here, and have a really great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.